Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. My name is Charles Philippe and in this video we'll be reviewing Armani Code, a classic fragrance that was released in 2004. As with every fragrance review, we'll be using the fragrance formula. We use it for every fragrance and you can download a blank copy to use yourself on your own fragrances. Be sure to send us a copy and we'd be delighted to hear your views on the fragrances you test. As I mentioned in the introduction to this video, Armani Code was released in 2004. However, its release at the time was under the name Armani Black. I remember that release very well and it came out to much fanfare. I even enjoyed the fragrance several times myself, however I never got hold of the bottle until now and instead at the time enjoyed it through testers. In 2005 it earned its name Armani Code instead and is a milestone for the fashion house in that it represents their first oriental fragrance. Now let's give it a try, let's see what we think. Remember, 2 sprays on the back of the hand at a safe distance and let's just let it dry ever so slightly. So the fragrance opens up with a deep and heady citrus bouquet. We have lime, bergamot and lemon. However, unlike most citrus heads, it's not fresh, it's tangy and it's quite mellow. There are notes of peppers as well that gives it some substance that makes it more masculine than most heady, most citrus heads. Now, very soon we start to detect a transition towards the heart. The citrus notes remain, they stay quite latent. And we start to make our way into sort of gourmand, quite spicy notes. So we've got star anise, I'd say creamy vanilla, which wasn't in the original formulation. This seems to be something quite new. And there's some olive blossom, which kind of makes sure it doesn't go too bitter. It adds a little bit of floral essence into the heart without it being too sweet. Now let's let it sit and get to the base. So a little time has elapsed and now we're starting to get into the base. I really like the base in Armani Code. I think it's the place where this fragrance shines. Let's not forget though that the head is quite unique as it comes and the heart is definitely intriguing. It's quite enticing, it's quite tantalizing, but the base is where the action happens. So we begin with powdery notes of guaiacwood. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, I've only ever read it. Guaiacwood is a wood that doesn't actually smell like ouds or agarwood or any other kind. It's quite sweet, a bit honey, it's powdery, it is dry, and it's quite reminiscent of tobacco. In fact, it is the note that's used to make tobacco fragrances. So this sort of plays with notes of amber and that's where we get this tobacco accord. Now this is only one part of the base and that's what makes it so interesting because with it we're getting a labdanum note which is present with tonka bean. Now this creates something slightly different, slightly musky, still quite dry but somewhat fresh. These interact to develop what I like to say is a leather accord. So here in the base we have 2 very celebrated accords in men's fragrances, which is tobacco and leather, that interact. Nevertheless, we still have that essence of deep citrus from the head. That is still active there. And we also have sort of slight gourmand finish from the vanilla. This makes a very enticing, a very seductive fragrance that just draws you in. Now, it's mild, it's not overpowering. That's the thing about Armani Code and it's something we're going to touch upon later. but nevertheless the composition has a life cycle that, although follows a conventional structure, we do have notes that overlap a lot more than most. There's something happening here, and it's something that is very exciting, and the wearer can really enjoy it, feel more bold, confident, but the person across from him will be excited, will be wanting to know more about this fragrance, and say they were at the same distance between you and I right now, they would be sort of wanting to experience it a little bit more, but only be getting hints of it. This will also lead on to our impressions and wearability, which I'll touch on later. With regards to the fragrance's seasonality, everything I just mentioned earlier, this is a very wintry fragrance and it could be worn towards the end of fall. I don't think it's really fit for spring or summer. I think that we're looking at something here that is ideal for, firesides. We're looking at something that's great for, cold strolls down an incandescent street, candlelit dinners. The spice elements like the anise and the vanilla, very reminiscent of big dinners and desserts at Thanksgiving or at Christmas. This isn't something that would feel quite right during those warmer months, and in fact, going towards its weight and strength, which I'll do so in a minute, is an advantage that it has, because if it was a summer fragrance, this would be penalized somewhat. Now, taking into consideration Armani Code's weight and strength, sadly we're looking at something here that doesn't perform as well as it should, especially something at this price point as well. We're looking at something that has a sillage which is intermittent and doesn't last very long. You can expect 3 good hours and then it to just sort of drop off the scale. Same thing can be said for projection and the longevity. Like I said, 3 hours of effectiveness. You could probably expect 4 or 5 hours tops of being able to smell this at a decent distance. Nevertheless, this, although is a disappointment, does have its advantages, and I'll touch on that just in a minute when I get to the wearability and impressions. Now, feedback for Armani Code has been overwhelmingly positive. Although there are some that find it to be a bit synthetic, there are some that find it to be a bit disappointing and may not enjoy it as much as most. Some even say it's a little bit dated. Generally people really enjoy Armani Code. They find it that it's a fragrance that makes them feel confident and strong, that makes them feel masculine without feeling macho, that is a very, like I said earlier, a seductive scent. It's very enticing. When they smell it from here, they have the knee-jerk reaction to getting closer, to smell it as an entire bouquet, and they can smell it several times over and still discover something new. As I mentioned several times earlier in this video, I really wanted to get to the impressions and the wearability. This is because the fragrance has a structure as if it was meant to do something. This is a fragrance with purpose. As I mentioned earlier, the weight and strength is a bit lackluster and tends to just fall down after a couple of hours. I also talked about the seasonality being specifically a winter fragrance, and then I talked about the seductiveness of its bouquet and of its composition. Now, where do you think this is going to take us? Now, in terms of age range, this is a very youthful fragrance. I've met a lot of people that say that they'd expect this to be on a young man. Some of the young men I asked about this really enjoyed it. A couple of my stepson's friends love it, and they're 14, 15. There are also men of my age. I'm 28, and I absolutely love this, and I loved it when I was my stepson's age as well. Then there's also the older group, I expect the target demographic when the fragrance was released in their 30s, that would be enjoying this as well. So we're looking at here quite a wide demographic, but I'd actually want to narrow it down and say this is an ideal fragrance for someone in their 20s for sure, but that can be used by someone who's younger in their late teens or someone that's slightly older in their early 30s. But I'd really say that this is something ideal for, say, students or young professionals. With the time of day, now we've talked about it being a winter fragrance, we've talked about it being a fragrance with a very low longevity. For me, this means that this is a fragrance ideal for the evening. If you look at the composition, we're looking at some very gourmand, very flavoursome, very seductive notes. This is something that would be perfect around the dinner time, when the sun is starting to set, when we're starting to get some twilight. Now, this leads on to my next comment, that this is the perfect date fragrance. This is excellent for a romantic encounter. From all the feedback that I received from it, it's a very seductive fragrance. It is full of intriguing and tantalizing notes that don't reveal themselves immediately, and its short lifespan means that it won't be overwhelming towards the end of the date. Now, without being too prudish, we want a date to end quite well and to become intimate, not necessarily overly intimate, but we're talking about hand-holding, kisses, a little bit nuzzling. Where Armani Code shines is that by the time you get to this, it won't be overwhelming. It'll still be enjoyable. It'll still be a fragrance that if she nuzzles into your neck, if she starts to hug towards you, if you hold her in your arms, she's not going to wrinkle her nose and be overwhelmed by it. In fact, if anything, it's going to comfort her, and it may, I wouldn't say seduce her, but she'd enjoy it. She'd definitely enjoy the experience. So this is the fragrance that I've tested so far that is as if it was made for going on dates. Now this leads me on to talking about masculinity. What do I think? I'd say that it's a moderately masculine fragrance. This isn't something that is macho and strong. It is decidedly masculine. It is a manly fragrance, but it's too refined to be over the top. This is something that is quite modest and subdued. However, it wasn't always the case. When it was first released, this was much stronger. Now it seems to be more creamy, a bit milder. I think the presence of vanilla and the extra use of amber has made it a bit more rounded off. So finally, the fragrance's presentation. What do we think? This bottle is interesting. Armani like to say that it was inspired by the lapels of a Armani tuxedo. It does kind of bring that out. I suppose you could call this plastic band here a cummerbund, and it does look somewhat reminiscent of a shawl lapel. Nevertheless, it's great for holding on to, very ergonomic. The curves just fit right into the palm of your hand, and the atomizer is decisive, gives a good cloud, not too strong and not too misty either. It can be used at any distance from here or here, and it can still be quite effective. With regards to the packaging, it's quite modest with a nice serif font. Going actually back to the bottle, we're looking at something here that is quite tall, so it's not going to fit very easily in travel bags. It's not going to fit very easily maybe in a lower cabinet. That might be quite inconvenient. Nevertheless, it's very eye-catching and it is definitely worth your consideration, except for one thing: value for money. Now it depends what you want to use Armani Code for. Do you want this to be a fragrance that you use every day, all day, in spite of everything I've said? If you do, you might be disappointed. This will need a lot more to be applied to perform just as well as some of the contemporaries on the same price point. So you may struggle to get it to perform. However, if you want to get something that you're using for dating, if you're single, if you're going out, if you're wanting to meet people, then this is perfect. When it was released, and even now its RRP is $106 for 125 milliliters, which is 4.2 ounces. That's pretty steep. But on Amazon, if you check the link below, you can get it on Amazon for around $85. But if you go on Notino, another link below, you can get it for as little as $64 for 125 milliliters. Personally, I think that is a lot less scary and a lot less of an investment than $106. Probably worth it. I'm not single, but my wife does enjoy it, so maybe for date night this would be a choice that I consider. After everything I said, this is certainly the quintessential winter date fragrance. I'd recommend it to any young bachelor who is looking for love, but I'd also recommend it to anyone who is an enthusiast of fragrances and wants to have an oriental in their collection from the prestigious Italian fashion house. It's a bouquet of a number of fascinating oriental notes that create leather and tobacco accords. That's just the base. The head itself is an adventure, a very mellow, a very tangy but oily and powdery head, and the heart, this gourmand, this tasty, this spicy combination of anise and vanilla that make it quite an intriguing catch. My name's Charles Philippe, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel, head to Bespoke Unit to learn more not just about fragrances but lifestyle as well. There's our Facebook page, our Instagram is very active, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you from the comments below. Take care.